Today, we're jumping into one of the biggest questions in forensic psychology. What actually makes a person turn to crime? Is it something they're born with, or is it something they learn? We're about to explore a super influential theory that argues it's all about who you spend your time with. So let's get right into it.
This is the classic nature versus nurture debate, isn't it? It's right at the heart of criminology. For the longest time, a lot of the early theories pointed towards biology, this idea of a criminal type. But what if the answer isn't buried in our DNA, but it's actually found in our friendships, our families, and the neighborhoods we grow up in? So here's our game plan. First, we'll set the stage with that big debate. Then we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of Sutherland's pretty radical theory, check out what the evidence has to say, weigh up the pros and cons, and then wrap it all up with exactly how you can use this stuff to absolutely smash that big essay question. Okay, section 1. Before we can really appreciate just how much of a game changer Sutherland's theory was, we kind of need to understand the world it was born into. See, the whole conversation around crime used to be dominated by a very, very different way of thinking. So on one side, you've got your biological explanations. These theories are all looking for the cause of crime inside a person. Their genes, their brain, even their physical features, if you look at some of those really early and now totally discredited theories. But on the other side, you've got social explanations, which say, hang on, crime is a product of what's going on outside a person. It's not about being a bad seed, it's about the kind of soil you're planted in. And that's where we're focusing today. So let's get to the core of this whole thing, Edwin Sutherland's big idea. Back in 1939, he put forward a theory that completely flipped the script on criminology. It moved the spotlight away from a person's biology and pointed it right at their social world. And here it is, Differential Association Theory. Now, I know the name sounds a bit heavy, but the idea behind it is actually really straightforward. Crime is learned. Simple as that. Just like you learn to speak a language or play a new video game, Sutherland argued that people learn the values, the attitudes, and even the how-to for criminal behavior through interacting or, associating with other people. Sutherland basically broke this learning process down into two main parts. First, a person learns the attitudes and motivations. That's the why of the crime. They start to absorb reasons and justifications for why it's okay to break the law. And second, they might learn the specific techniques, the how of the crime. Anything from how to pick a lock to how to disable a security system. This quote from Sutherland himself really nails it. It's all about exposure. He talked about being exposed to favorable definitions toward crime. All that really means is, if you're surrounded by people who think breaking the law is fine, or maybe even cool, you're probably going to start thinking that way too. It all just comes down to a matter of balance. So this is the crucial part of the theory, this almost mathematical idea. We are all exposed to two types of attitudes. Anti-criminal ones, messages that crime is wrong, and pro-criminal ones. Sutherland's big idea was that a person ends up offending when the number of pro-criminal attitudes they've learned simply outweighs the anti-criminal ones. It's like a social tipping point. Okay, so that's the theory. It sounds pretty logical, right? It kind of makes intuitive sense. But what does the research actually say? Does it hold up when we start looking at some real-world data? Well, to test this out, we can look at the very famous Cambridge study, led by Farrington. This was a massive study. They tracked 411 boys for decades. And what they found was that one of the single biggest risk factors for getting into crime was having criminality in the family. Now that is some incredibly strong support for Sutherland's whole idea. And this just connects the dots perfectly, doesn't it? This study found that if a boy had a parent or a sibling with a conviction, he was way more likely to offend himself. This fits right in with differential association. A child with criminal family members is just surrounded by pro-criminal attitudes and maybe even sees specific techniques right from an early age. They learn it all through socialization and imitation until it just seems, normal. And the learning doesn't just stop when someone gets convicted. Oh no. In fact, prisons can sometimes act like universities of crime. You take a young, maybe inexperienced offender and you put them in an environment surrounded by much more experienced criminals. Through that association, they can learn all sorts of new, more advanced techniques and attitudes, which, sadly, is a big reason why reoffending rates are so high. All right, so let's start to build our critical evaluation, because no theory is perfect, and as neat as differential association sounds, it's definitely got some major strengths, but also some pretty significant weaknesses. Okay, so on the plus side, its biggest contribution was that it completely changed the conversation. It shifted criminology away from just blaming a person's biology and forced it to look at the powerful role of their environment. It also has this incredible reach. It can explain white-collar crime happening in a corporate boardroom just as well as it can explain street crime. But, and this is a big one, it is incredibly difficult to test scientifically. I mean, how on earth can you actually count up the number of pro and anti-criminal attitudes a person has been exposed to over their entire life? As researchers like Matsueda pointed out, the core concepts are just a bit too vague, which makes the theory really hard to either prove or disprove for good.
Right. Let's bring all this home and focus on what you really need for your exams. How do you take this really interesting theory and turn it into a top-scoring 16-mark essay answer?
Honestly, it's a simple three-step structure. First, for your AO1 marks, just outline the theory clearly. Explain that crime is learned through association. Make sure you talk about learning both the attitudes and the techniques, and definitely mention that tipping point idea. Second, for those crucial AO3 evaluation marks, you bring in the evidence. Use the Farrington study, that's your powerhouse piece of support. Then discuss the strengths, like how it shifted focus, and the weaknesses, like how difficult it is to test those vague concepts. And finally, just write a short, clear conclusion that sums up your points and gives a final judgment on how valuable you think the theory is.
And on that practical note, if you feel like you could use a bit more one-on-one help to really get these ideas locked in before your A-levels, please don't hesitate to get in touch. The email is right there on the screen if you're interested in some personalized tutoring to help you get the grades you want. Just drop us a line. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Sutherland wrote this theory way back in 1939, long before the internet was even a dream. Now, in our world of social media, online forums, and private group chats, our associations aren't just face-to-face anymore. So my question to you is, does this make his theory of learning from others even more relevant and powerful, or does it actually start to challenge its core ideas? Let me know what you think down in the